Welcome to the Intentional Household, a LifeCraft podcast. Hi, I'm John Cuddeback.
And I'm Sofia Cuddeback.
Join us in seeking timeless wisdom for our time. Today's episode is Woman Still the Heart of the Home? This is going to be an interesting topic. I'm looking forward to this discussion. I think this is a tough one. I think in many ways this is going to take us to kind of the heart of home life and the heart of many challenges in it that we face, especially in today's world. And I would frame the question or the issue this way, and then, dear, you can frame another way if you want. Clearly, in a traditional understanding of the household, the understanding is that woman is the heart. And so the question is that an outdated stereotype and basically an inappropriate one that really didn't appreciate and give woman the place that she really should have? Or is it the case that that really is the truth? That is what we should be seeking to do right now in our homes now. Mm-hmm. The woman is the heart of the home. Mm-hmm. So do you have any opening thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the first thing that just occurs to me is that it probably would be helpful to even talk a little bit about what do we mean by the heart of the home? Like, I think everybody has a feeling about what that refers to, and it's certainly a very comforting phrase, but what do we actually mean when we say the heart? And then just the other thing, just to start out the conversation that I wanted to share, is that it's actually, I realized for me, I thought about this podcast and I thought it was going to be a little bit hard to talk about this for a couple of reasons for me. So first of all, one of the things I love about the approach of LifeCraft is that we're really talking about principles, about what it means to be human. And so there's kind of a abstract quality. And I love that because when we understand the principles, then we can apply them to the particulars of our own lives. So that makes it very available and very accessible and user-friendly for the many, many different types of people who might be listening to the work that LifeCraft is doing. So I love that aspect, but that's something that makes this conversation in particular a little bit tricky, because for me as a woman, it's not at all abstract. It's a very practical, very real, very live issue. And so there's a little bit of a challenge in this discussion about how to both look at it from a principled perspective, but for me as a woman, how to talk about it abstractly when it really is very personal for me. And then the other issue that...
Can I just say something right now, though, that I just want to say then, I want to have this be more personal. And this is not about, okay, we've got to get the principles exactly right. This is, I really think it's worthwhile our having a conversation here that is more kind of real time rather than trying to just, be like some kind of teaching session about what we think the right principles are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. But at the same time, I do want to keep the principle in mind, because I think the principle is part of the thing that gets us out of the quagmire, which leads me to the other point that I think sometimes makes this conversation challenging, is there are so many, people bring so many preconceived notions or emotional responses to certain kinds of words, especially on this issue of who a woman is and what her role is, and especially as regards the household. And so just kind of as we start out, what I just want to really encourage everyone to do is just maybe try to be aware that there are certain kind of triggers in this conversation, and to try to, first of all, just acknowledge that they're there, and that kind of recognize that a response might be a triggered response, and just to put that aside so that we can really talk about the issue a little bit more freely, and maybe it will be more fruitful in the conversation. And in that way, maybe we can also bring principles back into the conversation or keep them part of the conversation without them becoming something that bludgeons an individual in the conversation.
I think that's a great point. At the same time, I just want to give you freedom. If I say something that triggers you, you get it. You can be triggered.
I will smack you.
Because this is not about somehow just having, again, this is real. All right. So, is this something that has been unfair to women? It certainly is something that women experience as very difficult, right? And I think if we're going to unfold this problem, isn't part of it to see that there really are some very real reasons, very good reasons, that what we experience of what is lived as or what we think is woman being heart of the home actually can be very difficult and maybe even sometimes inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, actually, you said that we should begin by saying what we mean.
Yeah, I think that's great because that will also help us kind of ask the question, why do people consider that an unfair label? I mean, if labels are tricky because they are too general, but what would feel unfair about it? So if I
All
may
right.
kind of take a dive
Go ahead.
at what we maybe mean when we mean the heart of the home. First of all, kind of most obviously, I think we mean the affective center. So the place that both expresses the language of the heart, but most especially is able to comprehend what the members of the household's emotional, psychological needs are. And so I think when we talk about the heart, that's kind of maybe the first thing that we think of is that woman has a unique capacity in that regard of seeing individuals, recognizing where they are. I mean, obviously, all of this needs to be practiced and honed, and some people are better at it and other people not as much. But the more we practice it, we can become better, just like anything else. And that it's the woman in the home is kind of like a safe haven where hearts are safe, where needs are safe, where persons are safe and seen. And of course, the ideal is that the father of the home also expresses these things and enacts them. But a woman has a very particular ability, capacity, and role to do that. And maybe partially also because her contact with the members of the household is more extensive. It's very important that she be that way so that everyone feel like they have a place they can come to and where they're safe. So what do you think about that?
Well,
Do you think that expresses that?
I think it does, or in case I think it expresses something that ultimately should be central to it. Although I'm not sure. I don't think that's what most people would have immediately thought of. Although I think when people hear that, they'd say, "Oh, whoa, yeah, okay, the affective, affections. That's the heart." But in a more brass tacks way, and tell me if you think I'm wrong. I think part of what people immediately think of is, well, first of all, she needs to be there. And if you're the heart of the home, very often that probably means you're going to be there when your husband is not there.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of the glue that holds things together, where you're kind of at the heart of the home. And you're what in some way is even making home be home. If it doesn't have a heart, then it's not a home. And so I think people very much see the heart as being most essential to the home. And so doesn't this immediately get very much wrapped up in a woman's place is in the home?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be the heart, you can't leave. If there's no beating heart, then what do you have?
Yeah.
Although the funny thing is, if you call, traditionally, man was often called the head of the home, and you might say, well, how could there be a home without the head? Although I think that the way that this even works in our consciousness is when you say woman's the heart of the home, it particularly means she's tied to it. Mm-hmm. In a way that the man is not. She's got to be there. She's kind of the necessary baseline glue. Doesn't that seem so?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think that follows very closely upon what I shared as the affective center of the home, because at what point especially young children, but at what point do the members of the household not need a heart to be present? So if you really think about her role as the affective center, then it kind of seems to make sense that her persistent presence, like in a physical way, is something that actually responds to a really persistent need on the part of the members of the household. I mean, if you think of the comparison of the head of the household and the heart, someone can relay a message to you of an instruction or a directive, which would seem to be more like the head. And okay, great, I received that instruction. But when you need to be affirmed in your person and in an affective way, the presence of it doesn't work as well if you write someone a note. I mean, notes are great, but I think that the demand for the affective part of man to be nurtured and sustained, especially in the young, is something that's more persistent.
That makes great sense too. Then isn't this the point where then in many, well, let's just say more traditional discussions of this, that we would just say, all right, great. well, this will work great, doesn't it? I mean, there it is. This is what we need to do. Woman needs to be the heart of the home. People have this great need for their kind of emotional need. They need that safe place. They need to feel that love. That needs to be the baseline that's always there. That sounds like a wonderful thing for a woman to do. So, so she should just do that. Why would anybody have a problem with this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But clearly there's a problem. So what's
Well,
our problem?
I wonder if what part of the problem is when you describe that affective ability to affirm and to nurture. First of all, it's such an incredibly important thing that it's very easy to hyper focus on that because, I mean, in a certain sense, there is no focus that's a hyper focus. It is that important. But I think that sometimes what people then do is they make it be an exclusive thing, that because this thing that the woman does is so important and so critical, and she's so designed to do that well, that's all she can do. And so I think people take that kind of conversation about her being the heart of the home, meaning persistently present and affirming and effective, that she's not really good at doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's where a lot of women feel threatened, is that that's what you should do only that. And then the other things, well, you don't belong there, or you're not capable of doing it, or you're not able to doing it. And that's not saying that at all. To say that a woman is particularly suited and designed to meet the need of the household in this way, which frankly, no one else can. It's not even like, oh, you're good at that, you do that, and we'll have you take care of that while we do other things. No, it's really, a man can't fill that role in the household.
then I mean to interrupt you, but isn't them all right? But still, sorry. So we run into a problem here. That isn't at least in a lot of traditional men, or in the traditional view of this, would be okay. Well, then this is what's key that a woman does. She needs to do that, and she needs to do that consistently. One thing that this very much runs up against is the issue of a woman's career in having a profession outside the home, which is a very important thing to talk about. But I mean, I don't. We can't avoid bringing that up to some extent. It seems to me, though, to address the whole issue of a woman's possible career or profession outside the home, we need to address this first. We need to get a sense of what is a legitimate meaning of woman being the heart of the home or not. And then based upon that, it seems to me that would be what would allow us to think more clearly about the possibility of a woman's professional career. But clearly that already is to point to part of the problem here is this thing that you've started to sketch out as being the heart, the affective center. It's that kind of old pulsating heart that's always there. Clearly that's very demanding. It's demanding in energy for sure. It's also very demanding in time. And then, so it's when you say, well, people think, well, does this mean this is all a woman can do? Maybe it ends up being all that she has time to do, not all that she can do in the sense of she's not capable of doing other things. But if you're really going to do this is going to take all your time and energy. Wouldn't many women, wives, young wives and mothers, middle-aged, whatever age, say, yeah, it does take all your time. But so is that part of the problem? That kind of seemingly impossible tension, that ripping aspect of I have all these other desires, aspirations to do these other things, but I have a sense of how important this is to do it well. This is taking all my time, and it seems something's wrong there.
Yeah. So that you're just saying all that makes me think that maybe the best and most fruitful way of approaching this, which I propose that we do, is that the question of whether a woman should work outside of the household or not would seem to be, at this point, it almost like, let's do a separate conversation about that. And what I would be more interested in discussing is why don't we just assume or take for granted that a woman is within a household, in a married household, and is raising children in the household. So let's just take certain things as a given and just discuss what her role is within the household. What does that mean to be the heart of the household? And what are some of the challenges that come with that are really real in the environment that we're in right now? because I
Okay.
think there's some very specific challenges. And even some of the conversation around those things will even shed a little bit of light on the question of working outside of the home or working within the home. But let's just leave that question aside
Good.
right
I
now
like that.
and
I,
just
I,
dive
I
kind of
agree.
more particularly, kind of as a fundamental thing. If I am married and in a household and I have young children, what does that mean being the heart of the home? What does it look like? And what are the challenges
Right.
that we as modern women face in that
Well, I'm
role?
sure you're going to have a lot to say about that. I mean, one thing that strikes me that I would like at some point to speak into that is a kind of um, philosophical, historical perspective where it seems key, kind of like you said, we need to just say what we mean by the heart of the household. To some extent, we need to talk about household and what goes on there or not. What is the
Yeah.
project that's
Yeah.
being done here that I'm at the heart of if I'm the wife and mother? And that's going to be part of seeing, to my mind, there's this very important kind of historical aspect understood through philosophical eyes of the household. Today is not what it was before, and in many ways it's an eviscerated kind of shell of what it was. And so to be at the heart of an eviscerated shell is a very different thing than to be at the heart of a richer, different kind of thing. So at some point I
Yeah.
think we need to get that historical perspective. So do you
I
think
think that's a great place to start. Why
all
don't
right,
we go ahead and start with that?
well,
Because we are talking about real women in the present time and with our particular challenges. And I think
great.
what you allude to is actually really at the heart of what's at the
And
challenge.
you and I have certainly talked about this before, but let me see if I can kind of get this up here. Of I particularly saw this for the first time through a couple of great authors that I've read. A sociologist named Christopher Lasch has a bit to say about this. Wendell Berry has a bit to say about this. I mean, in short, painting with a broad stroke, it's the kind of the modern slash post-industrial household. One of the major things to see about it is simply a much less complex organism. There's much less going on. The removal, especially of work, of the kind of home as traditionally having been the economic center of human communities,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the case anymore. That exodus, the kind of exodus that happened, especially with men leaving the home, traditionally, sure, they would at times have to leave for military duty or to go and work on special projects. But by and large, it's historically so that in the more traditional structure of the household, they would have tended to be more regularly at home. And there was work that was kind of built into the household organism, especially tended to be agricultural work, and if not, then certain other crafts. So the Industrial Revolution, by and large, removes that work, and the first person it removes along with it is the man. So now he is tending to go out from for a good stretch of time throughout the week. Maybe very long hours. In the case, there's definitely a significant amount of time that he's away. So now we have a household where the husband and father's regularly not present, and there's not the work that also would tended to have been intergenerational, would have tended to be done in a kind of web of connection with other households. Both of those things were more associated with that traditional household, intergenerations
Mm-hmm.
and close connection between the other households, very much often demanded simply by that work that was being done. So that in itself is a civilizational shift where then you now have this, what's off really is we kind of think of the 1950s, again, what so many people think is the traditional household. It's not. It's very much of a post-industrial model where a woman tends to be at home alone with children, quote, raising the children, but not really involved in a lot of the other traditional arts of housewifery, which, as Wendell Berry pointed out, very much went along with husbandry. They were distinct but complementary, that would be tended to be done in various ways together. So this was so striking to me when I realized Wendell Berry is the one that put it this way. Of never directly face this head on. Of course, a woman is going to be inclined to say, "Why haven't I been left with this sinking ship that the men have jumped off of?" and they find it important and central to who and what they are and their whole kind of calling, that they're out there doing things that are fundamentally unconnected with what we're doing here. This goes along with a kind of societal shift where in general, we more and more really value kind of business success having almost nothing, really literally nothing to do with what goes on in your home.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're valuing these extra household, in other words, the outside the household stuff. But then we still kind of look back and say, oh, but woman, wife, mother, we're so glad that you're there to still be the heart of the home. And woman is naturally tending to say, but this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't something that's being broadly valued. Even if she doesn't have the historical perspective, which you and I right now talking about, it kind of makes this be more obvious. She just has this sense of great disconnection and loneliness with maybe a number of young children and almost no one else around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that pretty much describes why there is such a strong emotional reaction on the part of women when they're told, oh, you're supposed to be the heart of the heart of the home. It's kind of conjures up this image of being left behind, and not just left behind. I just want to like draw us back a little bit to the whole notion of the household as being this kind of entity that comes into being when two people look at one another and they make a promise of love and unity with one another. Till death do us part. We're in this together. And that's why you embark on this whole thing. There's nothing, I mean, some women are very attracted to children and domesticity and things like that. Not all women are, but many, many women get married, and it's because it's a commitment they give to this person that they love. And they enter into this very arduous task together because we're doing it together. And then all of a sudden to be in the middle of it and realize that your husband turns his face away from this thing that you've set in motion by virtue of your promise of love to one another. And his face is facing outward and frequently distracted, and his interest, oh, no, I'm making money for you and the children. It's kind of like it becomes this almost peripheral looking at, or he is doing it for his family, but it's kind of like looking at the family through a mirror. You're looking in the mirror and you're kind of seeing the family in the background. You're looking forward, but you're not looking directly at the family. This is, I think, what you mean when you say historically, the work of the household was the work that the man and the woman together were oriented toward. Now, because the way a man takes care of his family primarily is through providing economically, his gaze is turned outward, not just his body being gone. And so the woman begins to feel that this work that is, let me tell you, it is a lot of work. And why would you do it if you weren't doing it together with this person that you loved? And so I think this is why it's not just kind of a principled reaction to women should stay at home and be in the household. It's actually a very deep-seated emotional response of, I signed up for this and I've been left completely alone. It almost feels like a betrayal. You know what I mean? So,
or instance, I signed up for something that we were going to in some way do together.
Absolutely.
And wasn't going to look like me.
Yeah. And it's hard and it's complicated because especially once children are brought in, you're looking into the face of this young child, who just is demanding love and care. And you're staying at home and you're taking care of the child with all the hard things that go with it. And you're feeling like I'm not really happy. And then you start feeling guilty because it's not the child's fault and the child is so good. Why wouldn't I be happy? But really what you're not happy about is this was supposed to be a mutual project, not just the way, I don't know, building a house is a mutual project or saving money is a mutual project. It's actually at the very fiber, the reason this project even came into existence is because of your union, and you're just experiencing it as a disunion. So
well, this is very challenging because so much is going to be in a balance and trying to get this right. Because I mean, in any case, from my perspective, and again, we can certainly disagree, and it wouldn't be the first time that there is going to be a truth, I think, in which the woman, at the end of the day, you are called upon to have a role that to some extent has a kind of loneliness to it,
Mm-hmm.
has something of an isolation that's not going to be able to be completely overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like just, yeah, the big problem here is just she never should have had to be alone at all. Or, the
Mm-hmm.
husband needs to be changing 50% of the diapers. And if
Mm-hmm.
he's
No, no, no.
not, and I just, from my perspective, though, I have something to say that I think helps me understand better the problem, I think, through your perspective, because this is something that I have learned from you. In a sense, it's something I've learned from you about myself. It became clear to me that I basically, as a man, I had never thought of any of these things before we got married. I didn't think of them even quite a while into being married. I didn't, thank God, your pain started to become so intense that I started to feel it too.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me start to think about it more. But I realized I did have certain prejudices and expectations I think were simply wrong, or in any case, they certainly needed to be grown through. And that was, well, yeah, hey, I'm just going to be gone. And this is just what you do, isn't it? So in some sense, I think that tended to bring along with it, why is this hard for you? I mean, hey, I've got hard work I do, and you've got hard work that you
Mm-hmm.
do. I don't find myself complaining about, well, I wish I didn't have to work so hard out at the office and things that I'm doing. But why is it that yours seems to be eliciting, some complaining from you? And it gives me this opportunity, gave me this opportunity, still does, to look at myself and realize I think I did have certain wrong expectations where it would be like, well, there's this kind of traditional role that if a woman understands it and does it right, that kind of everything works fine. This shouldn't be so difficult. And part and parcel of that was I wasn't realizing how I was abstracted. I was really focusing elsewhere and not having a real sense of how I need to be involved
Mm-hmm.
here to, in some significant way, which would make a big difference for how you experience this. I might
Mm-hmm.
not be able to make it be perfect for you, but I need to have a different kind of expectation. One that A, is ready to see this is going to be super difficult for you. And indeed, in certain ways, I think we should say it, more difficult for you than it is for me.
Mm-hmm.
And also that it's going to absolutely require a kind of engagement, a kind of mental and heart affective engagement with you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to succeed in doing this role that I'm over here assuming that you've got covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a good way of describing it. You mentioned the word isolation, and that in a certain sense you're going to be doing it on your own. I mean, I just think it's so. From what perspective are we saying that, right? So, I think there's a certain kind of isolation that a woman who is trying to live the affective life of the home, heart of the home, in that really kind of very practical way, that simply is a function of the society we live in nowadays. So I think in a different structure where there was more flow of society through the household, you were interacting with other households, whether it was selling, eggs or, there was a household economy that was bigger than just the immediate household. And so women didn't feel as alone. We have a little bit of a problem now that when you choose to live that way, it's very challenging. You're very isolated from the world around you. And then there becomes this almost unnatural burden on the husband of making sure that the wife doesn't feel isolated. Right. And so, I have to believe that even in a different type of economically founded society, the relationship between the husband and wife and how they share a responsibility in the household would have been different, because now there are burdens that one or the other of us have to share in the household relationship that is more a function of the fact that society is structured in a way that the household is extremely isolated in itself. So I just wanted to acknowledge that
Yep.
this isn't about, if everything's right, the woman doesn't feel isolated at all. I think that both the man and the woman face a challenge in the household environment of that isolation because of the environment that we're in, the larger
Right.
social environment. And so I do think that it's important to kind of distinguish, well, what are real burdens, and which burdens are the ones that are kind of happening because either one or the other of us aren't fully kind of able to recognize and live our role in this thing that we've initiated by our promise and embarked upon together. So I think that's important to underscore.
Well, I'm fully with you in that. Can I ask a question? I would like to hear, and I give you full permission to be very frank. For some very important points in our marriage, it became clear to me that you were very frustrated about something that I was not seeing about your experience in the home, and I'm sure still, to some extent, still so. Can you share anything? Can you enunciate what that problem was? What was I not seeing? And what was the problem in my approach to kind of expecting you to be in the home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of hard to cast back to that historically because now we're down to one child at home. And so that kind of pressures on us are very different when you have a very full, buzzing household with lots of little kids. I think there's just a lot of physical pressure and exhaustion on me in that circumstance that would have even changed that experience. But so let me think how I would express that. I mean, part of it is certainly that being outside of the home, there's just a certain amount that you're not present and witnessing of what it actually takes to run a household. So, if you were physically present in the household, we would have been shouldering that burden together. So to a certain extent, it almost kind of defies the imagination. Unless you're doing it, it's kind of like, how would you ever really be able to understand what it's like to have tasks and chores to do and children interrupting. And I mean, it's almost kind of like, and if I just describe it to you, it's going to miss all kinds of nuance, which is actually the stuff of the difficulty. And so, very much at the heart of that was, you're just not here. So it's hard for you to actually experience what it's like for me. And then I will just describe by way of an illustration. It was always very funny to me that, and I would say, I'm taking the day off, and I would go and do whatever I, was going to do to take a break. And I'd leave the kids at home with you, and I'd come back and all the laundry was folded. Everything was done. The house had been picked up, and you were perfectly happy, and the kids were happy. And I'd be like, okay, so how come I can't do this when you're not around? And I realized that part of it was, the children just don't ask you for certain things because they don't go to you as the affective center in the home. And so the demand on you, and even doing all of the quote unquote tasks that, a homemaker would do, actually wasn't representative of what I do at home and why it's as hard as it is, because there's a certain element that is precisely that affective element of interpersonal relationship with the children that, I'd leave you at home with the kids and they just wouldn't ask you for that stuff. So, so that was always really frustrating for me because in a certain sense, the measure was how many tasks did you get done? How successful were we in completing that? No crises, et cetera. It is just kind of a natural way of enumerating what is it that you're so upset about? Look, check. We've checked the boxes, and there's all this stuff in between the boxes.
I wasn't really being the heart of the home.
No, exactly.
I forgot that.
Yes.
That's actually a very, very good point.
Yes.
By the way, and I want to say, partially in your defense here, and full disclosure, right? Sometimes, right, it would go well, and right then I'd be running around, kind of getting those things done because, right, the children weren't asking a lot of me. But otherwise, certainly another part of the experience we would have is it wouldn't be going well, and you'd get home, maybe even after being gone for 3 or 4 hours, and I'd say, "Oh, phew, well, okay, thank goodness you're home because I need a break now."
Yeah, exactly.
And you would either say or not say, but then become clear that you were thinking, "Excuse me, 3 or 4 hours, and you need a break now." ...
Sure.
So that, but there's another thing. The other aspect, wasn't it that, well, it seemed to me part of where we have disagreed before is that you, in any case, I feel that you felt like you had to kind of impress upon me, John, you're not seeing the unique burden of the kind of the loneliness, the not having intellectual interaction, the not having the stimulation of being around your friends. So that when I would kind of have this approach of, hey, I'm doing my thing, you're doing your thing, why isn't this just fine? That we needed to recognize here there is something uniquely personally demanding, especially given some of the things we've just said historically, that now, the household is more isolated. There isn't that web of connection. There aren't the other generations by and large. And there's not an opportunity for you not having the kind of help that you would have had. You're not able to even do some of the arts that you traditionally would have had. So it's less fulfilling for you intellectually. And it just kind of leaves you a little bit, well, it's kind of bracing. And I would resist, this is my recollection, I would resist just kind of affirming, gosh, yes, I really see and feel this, and I need to make this my own and recognize, even if I can't change it, I've got to be willing to go into this with you in heart and say, I'm so, because that's hard for a man to do. I mean, may I just say, I think that's been one of them. I mean, you tell me if you think it's otherwise. One of the biggest ways that I failed you was, it was almost because I want to be able to fix things. I wasn't able to fix this problem because I still had to go to work. And so I can't give you the web of connection that is just historically not available for you. So I almost more want to pretend that this can't be a problem because there isn't a solution. And of course, what I should have just said is, this is so crazy hard. Thanks for making the truly extraordinary sacrifice of being the heart of our home.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, that's very important for you to see that and acknowledge it just from a empathy perspective. But the other reason it's important is because when you begin to acknowledge it, then we begin to look for ways that we can actually address some of the hardships or difficulties. And I think that's really important, because I think to just kind of have a kind of euphoric, oh, woman is the heart of the home, is not really, it just sets people up for a lot of frustration and possible failure, because the reality is it's extremely difficult to do in the age that we're in right now. And there are a lot of challenges. I think it's,
and in any age, but especially difficult.
but especially now, yeah. I think we are in a uniquely challenging time to the household in general. And what we're talking about, woman is the heart of the household, but of course, in other ways, it is equally as challenging for men in the household. And to find their role in their household. In some ways, I think it's harder for the modern man, because for women, there is a kind of a natural connect. I mean, children need to be fed. They do need to be picked up. They do need to be hugged. In a certain sense, if you're going to embark on this, there's no way you can get away from that. Whereas for a man, he's been given an opportunity to get away from it and seek his satisfaction and things like that outside of the home. And so in a certain sense, a man has to more intentionally look for ways to stay connected, to keep his gaze going toward the family, to keep his heart engaged. So I just want to say that I think that the household in general is in an incredibly challenging time in history, where all the members, I mean, we could talk about the children in the household too. That's a completely separate conversation. But going back to kind of particular challenges for women in the household, I think it's really good to kind of specifically enumerate, well, what are some of the potential things that woman who's trying to live as the heart of the household, there's certain kind of restrictions that are put on her, as you said. Can you really do that and other things at the same time? If you're really going to jump in with both feet and really do it, it kind of absorbs your attention, your energies, your abilities in a way that it just doesn't leave a lot of time and energy for other things. And so I would love to share some of the ways that I've particularly felt challenged, because I do think that there are ways in which we can address some of those issues and kind of take a little bit of pressure off those valves.
Let's do that, please.
So a really big one is connectedness with the world around you. So if you're really in the thick of, especially young children, because their life is mostly centered in the home, there's a way that you just become completely absorbed in the activities of what's going around, this very demanding time. And it's hard as a woman to be excluded from the activity of the larger world. And so as we talked about it, and kind of as I needed in the beginning, I just needed to struggle through, what is it that's bothering me? What is it? It wasn't immediately obvious in disparate points. It was just kind of a general, I think I'm going to explode type of reaction. And so through a lot of thinking and talking about it, just kind of coming to, oh, I think this is part of the issue. And so when we discussed that, we kind of had this understanding of, it becomes a kind of an important part of what the man does for his wife is to bring the world home to her in a variety of ways, whether it's, reporting what happened here or there, or discussing things on the outside, discussing bigger picture issues and things like that. It's a very important thing that I know they often say that when men come home, they just want to be quiet because they've been out in the world and they've been using up all of their word capacity. And women at home, especially with very young children who are nonverbal still, are not using their word capacity. And so she just has a great need to talk. And the husband has just this need to be silent. But it is important for the man to have the sense of interfacing continuously for his wife, who is kind of de facto more isolated because of the work that's involved.
Do you mind to just jump in and don't lose your train? Because I want you to continue with that. But I do think it just really, really strikes me. You and I have talked about how one of our authors that we like, who writes on architecture and in the deeper principles of it, Christopher Alexander, when he addressed at one point certain stress that comes from just the structure of modern life, he said this, something that's very much of a piece with what we said earlier from Christopher Lashton-Wimble-Berry.
Yeah.
It's key to recognize there is an objectively stressful structure for marriage and home when the man has remote work, when he leaves for any significant amount of time to work, which is by far, of course, the standard thing. And frankly, even often working from home is still being removed from the household, because it's really going away in your heart, in your attention. And so it really struck me when he said you have to begin by just recognizing that that's an objective stress that there is no immediate answer to. There's no easy solution to this problem. It's going to have to be something of a compromise. And I think that says something very important about marriage and the relationship of husband and wife here, to recognize that objective stress that makes it be very difficult for both of us. I mean, it's striking me here. It's understandable that a man, who has often a very demanding work he has to do out there. This is part of the objective problem of, and we kind of chuckle at it, he comes home, he doesn't really feel like talking anymore. Well, okay. I mean, to some extent, we're going to have to meet each other somewhere in there, because that's going to be hard for the husband, and it's going to be hard for the wife. So what are we going to do about that? Are we going to just kind of get angry at it and get angry at one another? Or are we going to take this as an opportunity to recognize that we have to work through this together? There is no easy way. It's not just a matter of kind of shouting at the other person, demanding, well, you need to be willing to be more giving. But to some extent, the only answer is that we at least begin from the principle of, let's just understand that. And I think that's one of the most practical things. If we're really going to try to do something that I am convinced, and I know you are too, dear, that there is an incredibly beautiful aspect, incredibly important way, an irreplaceable way. The woman needs to be the heart of the home. It's going to take almost a heroic effort on both parts to think this through and understand why it's going to be extra difficult, and how we're going to have to be there to support one another through something that will remain a point of tension, regardless of how well we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. And I just think while you say that, it's making me think, oh, it's just so hard because we've been put into this situation by our socioeconomic situation, but meaning the world, the culture that we live in. But it's actually, in a lot of ways, it's really beautiful, because it actually is demanding of each of us to be more intentionally involved and to be more thoughtful about our environment, our relationship, what we put into our relationship, what we bring into our homes. And, it's a lot of hard work and it's exhausting, but honestly, it's very exciting because where does it bring our attention? Our attention goes to where our work is. If we're working to figure out how to recognize the stressors and how to alleviate them, or in any case, accommodate the stressors that we can't change, that's really great because where we're working, that's where our presence is. And so it's kind of, in a way, an invitation to be more present in our relationship, more present in our homes. So, rather than kind of just, wringing our hands, oh, this horrible world that we live in, the challenge is so great, it's so awful, it's so awful. No, it's actually really great because, the challenges aren't great. They're difficult, but they produce something that is far greater than the challenge, which
Right.
is kind of our intentional work together.
That's a great
Yeah,
point.
it's exciting.
Now, I have a lot of thoughts in my mind right now. Do you remember, I think, because I kind of sidetracked you, was there another point that you were about to make? Do you remember?
Yes. So another thing that I feel that women who are kind of trying to live the heart of the home principle, because your daily trajectory of tasks is very much demanded by the need at hand. It doesn't, especially with young children, it doesn't give you a lot of room to choose what you do. And so I think one of the frustrations is a lot of women, and I certainly felt this, there are certain things or talents or gifts that we've been given. It's, it's part of our personality that might not happen to overlap with the demands of being the heart of the home. And that is very frustrating. You feel like a gift or a talent that you have is just dying on the vine because of this household, and then you begin to resent the household, you resent your husband, you resent your children, and all these particularities. And all you can think of is, surely this is just oppressive to women, because my experience is this thing in me is being suppressed and it can't be used. And I just thought to myself, what would be the point of having given me this gift, this talent, this particular ability, which it's part of who I am. It was there from the moment I was conceived in the womb. Why would it have been given to me if then this relationship that happened through a commitment to another person whom I love, and that would all of a sudden trump all of this, and that talent or gift that's part of who I am would all of a sudden be obsolete and totally kind of irrelevant? And so as I thought about it, I realized that a lot of the things that are connected to my gifts or my talents, which I don't feel like they overlap with domesticity very naturally. So there were a lot of things that I couldn't do when we were having young kids. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I recognized is I think that those talents and gifts are given to you for a purpose and they're meant to flourish. And I think that we actually sometimes get stuck with an idea of what's the best expression of those things. And when it's not expressed in that way, we think that our talent or gift is being suppressed. Whereas in fact, what's being suppressed is your preconceived notion about how that talent or gift is best expressed. So for me, music, singing was just something from when I was very little. My parents used to laugh. They said when I was tiny, I would say, all I want to do is sing and dance on stage. And that just really wasn't a possibility to pursue that once we were raising our family and growing our household. And then, so I was really frustrated and I thought about it a lot. And I really was kind of crying out to God, like, what were you thinking? And I just all of a sudden realized that if my conception of really exercising my vocal gift was to be an opera singer on stage, yeah, that wasn't being fulfilled. But then I went deeper inside. I said, is it being an opera singer that you want to be, or is it singing? The gift or the talent is not being an opera singer, it's being a singer. Is that really being suppressed in your life? And then I began to look more creatively and say, oh, wow, I sing to my children every night when I put them to bed. We make long car trips be shorter by teaching them rounds and then singing them all in the minor key. So for then all of a sudden I began to realize there was a lot of opportunity for me to sing. And so kind of forced me into going, well, what is it that your gift really is? And what is it that you really desire? Obviously, singing in an opera house and getting applause when the curtain comes down and your name in a newspaper is really awesome, but it's kind of like that's getting your name in the newspaper. It's not really singing. And so So I just think that it requires a certain kind of extra creativity and trying to recognize your gifts. And my experience has been that all of the things that are my strength, actually, there has been ample room for me to express them in the context of our household. I've had to be creative, and sometimes I've laughed out loud saying, wow, this is where my inclination for graphic artistry comes out. And it's been very fun. It's been kind of a delight of discovery, and realizing that sometimes when I thought that what I was looking for was a talent or ability was actually recognition.
Mm.
And so, it's helped me be more authentic and honest about what are you really seeking. And I will say
Wow.
that the hidden life of being the heart of the home, just like your heart isn't, your organ isn't on the outside of your chest, it's on the inside. There is a hiddenness to this role that is its own difficulty. That I think if we can really meet it at the source of its difficulty, the growth there is really profound. So
Wow.
it's an incredible challenge.
That is a challenge. And I feel like I thank God for your incredible insight on that, but that insight was hard won.
Mm-hmm.
That came from your being willing to suffer and to give something up. And I feel like it was really probably only in the giving up, which was a genuine giving up, that you found this further fruition. It also strikes me how important it is from a husband's perspective. There's just so many things that are coming to my mind as you're saying this, that I think a man is often tempted when he sees his wife suffering to take an approach that I think might be a mistake, and it's kind of a great lie of our age. You can have it all. Oh, well, I don't want you to have to give up everything. No, you don't have to give up everything. And kind of mixed with, and I don't want you to be suffering like this. It might even be a little bit of selfishness. This is hard for me that you're suffering like this. And this is delicate. This is delicate. It's not a one size fits all. There obviously are appropriate ways. This connects with something you said earlier of the husband bringing the world in, and sometimes appropriate ways. A husband needs to encourage his wife to go out.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. It's just not as though being a heart of the home means that you're literally always there, and aren't in very serious ways engaged in the community. So in certain ways, a husband and wife together have to be, I think, prayerfully discerning what is fitting while still maintaining the reality, the truth, and the beautiful reality of a woman being on the heart of the home. How can she go out? To some extent, there is always going to be an aspect of you can't do it all. And to choose this means that you're going to give up that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's a little bit of, unless the seed die and it's kind of planted in the ground. And just to hear your beautiful testimony of again, I know it's very hard one of, well, okay, then I can redirect some of those desires and inclinations and talents I had in a different way. Wow. I think that in part came because you did make a hard choice. You knew that a yes to your husband and your children right now demanded a no to something that was a legitimate desire of yours, that you were willing to set aside. And I almost thought, you didn't say this, but I almost wonder whether we could go so far. I have to be careful with this, but almost so go far as saying, when you said every kind of gift has been given for some reason, is it possible that sometimes even a great reason for the gift is that maybe it's going to be given up?
Mm-hmm.
I think some people, humans have a natural generative power to be parents. And some people give that up for a higher reason. So sometimes something that seems, how could I have been given this without it being the case that I, of course, should use this? It might be the case that you've been given something precious that you're going to make a sacrifice of. And I know that could be overdone and can't simply be demanded. But I just realized all the more in talking about this, how a husband has to be with his wife and has to go in with her into her heart. Indeed, may I say this is also something that really struck me is if a woman is going to be heart of the home, a husband has got to be giving her his heart in a profound way. Otherwise, she's just not going to make it.
Yeah. He has to be like the lifeblood for the heart.
I mean, it's an amazing design in that way. And when I think of probably, I mean, there's something kind of cruel about this. Certain ways, maybe even perhaps that our children experience that you were not there for them. Generally, I think their experience is quite that you were there. But I mean, if there's an aspect that you weren't there, it could easily be that I was failing to be with you, empowering you to do this. So isn't this key? If it's still the case, and I don't know if the word still is the right word here, because it makes it sound as though somehow it's taking something from the past. If the reality is that a woman by nature is called to, in some way, important way, needed to be the heart of the home, this engages the husband's role in a profound way. And that's a whole topic in itself. What does a husband need to do and to be if it really is going to be the case that the woman can and should be the heart of the home? There's a whole set of things that as a man, I have to recognize and I have to be willing to do. And that is going to be extraordinarily difficult for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what occurs to me, you said giving up. It's funny, in some ways, there's a giving up of those things, but actually what it is a claiming of them and coming to you and saying, this is part of who I am, and I need to be able to live these things. How can you help me be able to live those things? And again, both being creative, it might not be in the standard way, but when I bring that to you, first of all, it gives you an opportunity to see something about me that maybe you had missed. And then that's part of your empowering me to continue to live fully who I am. It doesn't mean that you're going to, make it so that I can start going to voice lessons and, go on a tour for opera singing. No, we're going to always, the two of us together are always going to prioritize first the demands of the household on each of us.
Right.
But you're going to make a special effort first by simply seeing and recognizing that there is this need in you, this aspect of you that is a talent or a gift. That first is just recognizing it already. It validates and authenticates it. And then second of all, helping to be creative and figuring out in the context of what's given to us, how are these things going to flourish so that they actually stay a part of who you are.
Right. Which, if I may say, is part of which is I have got to recognize the sacrifice that entails on your part. And it's just, I've already said this, but just want to say it again. It is my sincere hope and desire that in many ways, by the grace of God and your generosity, has been fulfilled, that you be the heart of our home. But I need to be deeply aware of, again, what that demands of me, but what it is demanding of you. And what you are giving up to do that. And even if it is in some sense what you, quote, should do, that doesn't make it any less of a free and generous gift that I should have a sense of, really, are you willing to do this? And thank you so much for doing it. Indeed, we can't end here without my saying, I just want to explicitly express my gratitude. I have learned so much about God's astounding plan and the beauty of femininity. I know it shows up in different women in different ways, and each has to discover it in their own way. But I have had such an amazing experience in you of someone committed to being the heart of our home, who has been always a place, as it were, my heart can come back to, that all of our children experience kind of enveloping them, giving them a place that they can always come back to, that makes that house up the hill there where we live together fundamentally be what it is, to be a place of joy and peace and love. Not that it's your role alone, but there's something so utterly unique to that. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, I'm going to say my pleasure. And it can only be that way because it's a product of something we do together. I think that's the great gift and grace, that it's something we do together. Praise
Well,
God.
we've got a lot more work to do, don't we?
Yep.
And this,
exciting
having
to
this
look forward to it.
conversation made me realize lots of things were jumping into my mind about how are we going to do that? Well, any case, great, dear, to have that conversation with you. Great to share that with you all, and we look forward to being with you some more. Take care.
Bye.